I was out here fishing at the sewage treatment plant on September 11th, and we had heard that through phone conversations that New York had been attacked. And out on this part of the river, planes fly up and down the river, north and south, depending on which direction the wind's coming from. But they make their flight path right over the Potomac River, and they're usually about 2.5 to 3.5 minutes apart. Well, all of a sudden we realized, I guess it was about 9 o'clock or so, we realized that the planes had stopped, and we didn't really see anything. So we kind of were looking up towards the sky, just looking around while we were fishing. And that's when we kind of noticed that there was a plane coming out of the east sky. And normally planes would be coming north and south, but this plane was coming out of the east. It kind of made a circle over the river, headed back north. And as it went down right past National Airport. Kind of almost looked like it was approaching for a landing, but then we saw black smoke. At that time I thought maybe it had hit the airport, and maybe there were passengers in the water, and maybe there was something that we could do to help. So we strapped everything down and we headed over there. And as we got closer to the airport, we realized it wasn't the airport. It was somewhere on the other side of the airport. And it was just a matter of a few seconds after that we were already towards the Pentagon Lagoon at Columbia Island, and we saw the smoke, and it was attributed to the Pentagon itself. By the time the planes get to this part of the river, they're usually fairly low. They're making the approach for landing. This plane was a little bit higher than some of the other planes, but still wasn't that much higher than what I would consider to be normal. So it was coming in to where we could get a pretty good look at and see that it was a plane and kind of see what it was doing. But then again, there are no runways that run east-west, so I was a little bit kind of perturbed at that time that something was wrong, that this plane was not making the typical kind of approach to the runway.
Well, here's a plane making the typical approach right here. I don't know if you can see that. Here we go. Blue bottom, white plane, headed right towards landing at Reagan National. Now that's the regular approach of planes. They do that all day long, right?
They do that all day long. About every 2.5 to 3.5 minutes, we'll see planes coming and going. If the wind is blowing out of the north, the planes will fly into the north, they'll take off into the north. If the wind is coming out of the south, they'll fly into the south. They'll also land into the wind towards the south. This particular plane was not coming down this flight path. That particular plane was coming off the sky over here to the right and was making an approach right about where that plane is now. Is about where that plane, except it was much higher. It was much higher, and then it kind of banked in towards the airport.
Would you say it was coming, so it was coming from D.C., the D.C. area, essentially?
Well,
say that it flew over D.C.?
Well, it looked like, yeah, it looked like it could have flown over D.C., that it was coming out of the east. Now, whether it was the northeast or the southeast, we couldn't tell, but it was probably more northeast towards the district than it was southeast from where we are here on the water. From the south, it would have come this way. Southeast would have been here. Northeast is where we saw that plane come around and make that turn.
Okay, how far out did you say it went west or southwest? How far back that way did it go when it turned around and come back around?
It made a pretty big loop over there. It went, from my guess, it went over Crystal City. It went over Crystal City, which is Arlington, and then made a turn back.
When it turned back to go this way towards the Pentagon, how far out would you say it went this way?
Well, it didn't go much this way. It went that way, and I'd say it probably went a mile or two that way, and then made the turn back.
Here's the Pentagon. We're on the Potomac. You were here. They say,
yeah, I was right about here.
Right. So they're claiming it came from
here,
the west, did a loop, never ever was on the east side of the Potomac at all, and then flew into the Pentagon and did the loop over Arlington and Alexandria.
Yeah, see the plane that I saw made this loop right here, made this loop and made a turn back this way, just like this. Came across the river, came from this direction, came around, made the loop back towards the Pentagon. I don't know about that plane or where it came from. That's not what I saw.
Okay.
So you would say that diagram is not accurate as to what you saw?
Not, from what I saw, no. to me it looked like just a commercial airliner. Didn't look like anything else. Just looked like a normal commercial airliner that kind we see land and take off every 3.5 minutes out here on the water. The plane that I saw made this loop right here, made this loop and made a turn back this way, just like this. Came across the river, came from this direction, came around, made the loop back towards the Pentagon. It made a pretty big loop over there. It went, from my guess, it went over Crystal City. It went over Crystal City, which is Arlington, and then made a turn back. By the time the planes get to this part of the river, they're usually fairly low. They're making the approach for landing. This plane was a little bit higher. It was about 2 or 3 minutes from the time that we noticed the plane till it crossed the river, till it made the bank, and it went down. And then we saw the smoke. So it was about 3 minutes while that plane was in the air. It was probably more northeast towards the district than it was southeast from where we are here on the water. From the south, it would have come this way. Southeast would have been here. Northeast is where we saw that plane come around and make that turn.